Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ethics Connect.
The number one podcast in Metro Cebu.
Where we talk about all things ethics and so much more.
This is Group 2, and you are listening to
Ethics Connect. So, for today's episode, we will be tackling natural law.
Wow, interesting. What is natural law?
Right off the bat. When I hear that term, natural law includes the idea, for example, that it is universally accepted and understood that killing a human being is wrong.
That's right. However, it is also universally accepted that punishing someone for killing that person is right.
So basically, the idea demonstrates that without the requirement of legislation, such beliefs are something that human beings understood inherently as wrong without the requirement of law. So now we basically already have the gist of what natural law is, but to define it in ethical terms, natural law is a theory in ethics and philosophy that says human beings possess intrinsic values that govern our reasoning and behavior.
To add to that, it is based on the idea that right and wrong are universal concepts, as mankind finds certain things to be useful and good, and other things to be bad, destructive, or evil.
Okay, so essentially, this means that what constitutes right and wrong is the same for everyone, and this concept is expressed as morality.
To deeply understand natural law, we will be dividing this podcast into 5 parts, starting with its brief history.
Natural law was initially defined by ancient Greek philosophers Aristotle and Plato. Plato did not have a theory in natural law. However, some of his theories involve concepts of natural law. On the other hand, Aristotle focused on the distinction between law and nature. It then led to the introduction of natural justice, which can be attributed to the Stoics. So, following Cicero, former Roman consul, explained natural law as something that can contribute to the general good of society, whereas positive law would contribute to the safety of society. It was also used to justify the establishment of positive law and therefore government and legal rights. Overall, as philosophy theory grows, the coincidence of positive and natural law will continue to be referenced, disputed, and analyzed.
So, Natashi, you mentioned positive law. Can you enlighten us?
Sure, now, first of all, natural law should not be confused with positive law, as it does not involve judicial decisions or legislative enactments.
Right. Furthermore, natural law highlights human behavior involving ethical standards and ways of being inherent, while positive law involves human made law that incorporates rules that can be applied to specific actions at certain time and places.
In short, natural laws are inherent in us as human beings. Positive laws are created by us in the context of society.
This time around, let's talk about the key features of natural law theories. Can you shed a light about what those are and how they are essential?
Sure, Blanche. First is the natural law and divine providence. According to Aquinas, the natural law is a participation in the eternal law. The eternal law is the rational plan by which all creation is ordered. The natural law is the way that the human being participates in the eternal law. In addition, non rational beings have a share in the eternal law only by being determined by it. Their actions non freely results from their determinate natures, the existence of which results from God's will in accordance with God's eternal plan. Rational beings like us are able to grasp our share in the eternal law and freely act on it. And to put a statement, law is a rule of action put into place by one who has care of the community. And as God has care of the entire universe, God's choosing to bring into existence beings who can act freely and in accordance with principles of reason is enough to justify our thinking of those principles of reason as law.
Let's get to the second key feature, which is the natural law and practical rationality. To start off, according to Aquinas, recipients of the natural law are us, The natural law constitutes the basic principles of practical rationality for human beings and has this status by nature. Moreover, natural law are binding by nature. No beings could share our human nature yet fail to be bound by the precepts of natural law. This is so because these precepts direct us towards the good as such and various particular goods.
Right! The good and goods provide reasons for us rational beings to act. It is in virtue of our common human nature that the good for us is what it is.
And lastly, natural law are knowable by nature. All human beings possess a basic knowledge of the principles of the natural law. This knowledge is exhibited in our intrinsic directness towards the various goods that the natural law enjoins us to pursue, and we can make this implicit awareness explicit and propositional through the reflection on practice.
Wow! What an insightful key feature we have there. Now, let's dig deep into the next key feature, which is the substance of the law. According to Aquinas, the fundamental principle of the natural law is that good is to be done and evil avoided. We know immediately, by inclination, that there are a variety of things that count as good and thus to be pursued: life, procreation, knowledge, society, and reasonable conduct. In connection, Aquinas had thoughts about goods. 1. There are certain ways of acting in response to the basic human goods that are intrinsically flawed. And 2. For an act to be right or reasonable, it is for it to be an act that is in no way intrinsically flawed. An act might be flawed through the circumstances. While one is bound to profess one's belief in God, there are certain circumstances in which it is inappropriate to do so. In addition, an act might be flawed merely through its intention: murder, lying, and blasphemy. Summing up the third feature, an action can be irremediably flawed merely through the badness of the intention. Thus, no good consequences would be sufficient to justify it. Now, moving on, while we're talking much now about this topic, can you elaborate the importance of law?
Natural law is important because it is applied to moral, political, and ethical systems today. It has played a large role in the history of political and philosophical theory and has been used to understand and discuss human nature. To further understand this one, when a child tearfully exclaims, "It's not fair," or when viewing a documentary about the suffering of war, we feel pain because we're reminded of the horrors of human evil. And in doing this, we are also providing evidence for the existence of natural law.
How can we solve ethical dilemma using natural law?
Well, to answer that question, how to solve an ethical dilemma using natural law, is the basic belief that everyone is naturally entitled to live their own lives must be considered and respected. From there, natural law theorists determine what an innocent life is and what elements compromise the life of an unjust aggressor. To continue, the natural law theory pays particular attention to the concept of self-defense, a justification often relied upon in an attempt to explain an act of violence.
I agree. And it has been the case with self defense claims throughout history. It is often difficult to apply what seems to be a simple concept, whether right versus wrong, to issues that are actually complex in nature. Here is an example: act of violence like murder work against people's natural inclination to live a good and innocent life. Therefore, in a situation where the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and an act of violence is committed against the smaller group of people in order to save the larger one, the act still goes against human nature. With that being said, killing another person is forbidden by natural law, no matter the circumstance, as it goes against the human purpose of life. Even if someone is, say, armed and breaking into another person's home, under natural law, the homeowner still does not have the right to kill the person in defense.
You're right, EJ, and that is what natural law differs from actual law.
Wow, we've learned a lot in today's podcast. So, guys, what are your takeaways about our topic?
I'll go first. Natural law theory holds that all human conduct is governed by an inherited set of universal moral rules. These rules apply to everyone, everywhere, in the same way. As a philosopher, natural law deals with the moral questions of right versus wrong and assumes that all people want to live good and innocent lives.
True. And the concepts of natural law are ancient and stemming from the times of Plato and Aristotle. Natural law is constant throughout time and across the globe because it is based on human nature, not on culture or customs. It is also philosophical theory. It doesn't require political order or legislature. How about you, Christian?
My takeaway is that natural law is the opposite of man made or positive law, enacted by courts or governments. Under natural law, taking another life is forbidden, no matter the circumstances involved, including self defense.
I guess that ends our podcast, you guys.
This is Group 2, and thanks for listening to
Ethics Connect.